Thank you, Annette. Good morning and welcome to the Humboldt Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, an open-minded, open-hearted spiritual home to everyone who values acceptance for all people and cares for all life on earth. I'm Pat McCutcheon, your facilitator for today. Thank you so much for joining us online. It's good to have you here. First, we humbly acknowledge that the fellowship and many of our homes are on ancestral Wiyot lands, and we are learning to live with the truth of their treatment in the past and to this day, as well as learning the wisdom of their traditional practices and continuing perspectives. Please consider for a moment what is in your heart. If you have a joy or a concern that you would like to share, would you please write it in the chat, and later I will drop a pebble for each joy or concern so the ripples can spread to all of us. I'll look forward to hearing from you in the chat. Since April 2020, we Friday poets have written together and overcome some of the COVID blues. So we're here today to celebrate poetry. For as Mary Oliver says, poems are not words, after all, but fires for the cold, ropes let down to the lost, something as necessary as bread in the pockets of the hungry. So we hope you're hungry today, because for the third time, we'll be offering some of our own poems to fill your pockets. The sound of the bell now calls us to a spirit of reverence, and Anne Kilby will help us open sacred space.
Good morning. I have here our chalice. You'll see it includes earth and air, and it will include fire, and there's water. And I've included rosemary. We have so very many to call into remembrance all over the world. We light the chalice to help us warm our hearts with our faith and our convictions. And with this chalice lighting, we offer this poem. It's by Muskogee Indian Joy Harjo, who also has been 3 times the U.S. Poet Laureate. Eagle poem. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning on Salt River, circled in blue sky in wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed, because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle rounding out the morning inside us. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Please will everyone who wishes help us to repeat our aspiration as we like to do every week. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. And now we'll go to our time for all ages, which will feature a poem. Jean Munsee will give us the poem, and it's one of her poems.
Thank you, Anne. Good morning, all ages, and especially children. I'm going to read you two poems this morning. The first one is a very, very old one. Probably it will be familiar to your grandparents and maybe even your great-grandparents. And the second one is a poem based on the first one about springtime in Humboldt County. Here's the first one. Spring has sprung, the grass is riz. I wonder where the flowers is. And here's the one based on it. Spring has sprung, the signs are plain. Colorful new flowers love the rain. Spring has sprung, the greens are greener. No more rains when air is cleaner. Spring has sprung, soft winds are blowing. In the fields, the calves are lowing. Spring has sprung, the clouds are scudding. Everywhere, the buds are budding. Spring has sprung, the horses neigh. Sweet grass now instead of hay. Spring has sprung, fast rivers flow. Too cold for swimming these days, though. Above the marsh, the ospreys hover. Frightened fishes dart for cover. Spring has sprung, the birds are twittering. Among the leaves, the raindrops glittering. Spring has sprung, the kids are running. Too cold still for beachside sunning. Spring has sprung, you've heard my poem. Now it's time to write your own. And now, as the children leave for religious exploration and maybe to write a poem, Annette will play Go Now in Peace.
Our first poet, Debbie Harrison, once had a high school teacher who encouraged her to write poetry, to write more poetry, but she thought he was just being nice.
Thank you, Pat. In our Friday group, we weekly get prompts to help us come up with something to write a poem about. And the prompt for this poem was to write a biography of ourselves as a poet. Instead, I wrote about how a poem develops in me. Genesis. In the beginning, there is pressure creating a void. No word, image, or feeling. The void widens and something seeps or pours in. My task is to hold open that space, those gates, allow what enters to take shape. Images and feelings then start to come. Grasping for words, a theme takes form. Now it needs to rest, to gestate, toss and turn, stretch and grow into a concept, pushing against the pauses and empty spaces that come to define it. now moving toward its voice, toward that last line that brings it full circle. Our next poet is Diane Dickson. Diane grew up in a family where words were highly regarded, as shown when her 90-year-old mother usually beat her at Scrabble, and her father's poetry became widely published after his retirement. Her first poem speaks to this family story.
I want to thank you all for being here and for supporting our creative development. We appreciate that, and we need that. My first poem, the title is Lessons on Becoming at Least an Amateur Poet Before the Time Runs Out, an Early Draft. Start with a mother who loves dictionaries. Watch her steal time to rest in those pages, whispering the Latin she learned long ago. Notice her trace definitions, derivations, absorbing the meanings, the nouns, and the verbs. Walk by her quietly to honor the silence. Love how she rests in her playground of words. Add in one father lost in his books, deep in his dream to bring life to the page. Hear typing daily behind the closed door. Notice the trash baskets filled with revisions, playing with sounds and sharpening scenes. Watch as submissions become publications. Then savor the poem alive on the page. My second poem is entitled Insistence of Spring. When Eliot wrote, April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, he spoke in the aftermath of World War I, in the aftermath of mental breakdown, in the aftermath of his father's death. Spring is the season for suicides. We thought it was winter, but no, it is April and May, when the earth gives birth in a carelessness of beauty, insisting upon itself, presenting itself flamboyantly to us, uncaring of its effect, unconcerned with whether flagrant beauty lifts us up or flattens us entirely. That is no matter to spring. Our next poet is Jenny Hansen. Pat's Poetry Conversation Group introduced Jenny to writing poetry. She relishes the unexpected self-discoveries that are often pivotal in finally completing a poem. Jenny?
Thank you. My poem is entitled Ode to Humboldt. A cancer with Bay Area and Stanford written all over it. I knew nobody there who could help with the slog, the procedures, the waiting, the many long trips. I couldn't do it alone. I had to have help. This way, yelled the signposts in red. But stubborn, determined, I said, I won't go. Knew that my succor lay right here in Humboldt, where friends lived and shared inside circles of caring. Somehow, some way, they'd help me come through. I stayed here in Humboldt, home of my heart, small enough to know many people, large enough not to know all. Warm community, caring, welcoming, and giving like no other, often unseen, coming together in support of all causes they love. Into the pain and the terror came a sweep of new friends. Didn't know each other, now a new circle of support. Brought food, swept the floor, fetched books from the library, ran errands, did laundry, emptied garbage, fixed the bed, found answers to needs I couldn't define, drove me to places that lit up my fire. It's what happened between us that fills my heart's well. Each brought talents and depths, unknown, unexplored. New springs of joy sparked as I learned how to say those hard words. I need help. I'm here to give help, came like an echoed response. From their kindness, our relationships grew, morphed into unimaginable depth. My journey continues from darkness to light. My people, Humboldt people, still hold me with love, share tears, laughter, encouragement, good wishes, say prayers, have faith I'll come through, bring affection and solace. Transformative helpers, the nature of Humboldt. Thank you. So many of you here are part of what made this poem happen. I am profoundly grateful. Thank you all. And you know who you are. It's half the people here, at least, and more. Our next poet is Laurel Bussey, who likes to be succinct.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Good morning. I have two Senryu for you. Senryu are those 17-syllable Japanese poems, like haiku, but not about nature. Here's one. I always wanted to ride on the Goodyear blimp. I did. Got airsick. And the other, I try to be tolerant, but sometimes I get on my own nerves. Marla West is our next poet. She grew up on a farm during the Depression. She was outside on a horse most of the time, or if inside, playing the piano. In college, she took a poetry class, but never wrote any. Recently, she found her way to this poetry group and is very glad that she did. And so are we. Marla?
Thank you, Laurel. The name of my poem is And Still the Bombs Fall. On television, I watch innocent people run from their homes, and still the bombs fall. My mind wanders back to our small farm in Oregon, Depression era. My blind old Russian grandfather and I share a room where I would fall asleep. And I can't remember the ending of these old Russian folk tales. And still the bomb falls. He fought in the last Tsar's army, became ill, and was thrown in the death pit, but escaped and hitchhiked thousands of miles back to announce to his wife, "I will not raise my sons under this flag." And still the bombs fall. An elderly aunt already living in New York sent him boat passage. He got a job laying down rails across America, the first railroad, saving enough to bring his family to America, where he became a wealthy rancher in 3 mountain states. And still the bombs fall. He lost it all during the Depression, couldn't pay the property taxes, became blind. He was the only babysitter I ever had. We were buddies. I still can't remember the ending of those stories. And still the bombs fall. Thank you. And our next poet is Debbie Harrison, who tells us that she has played a lot more music than she has written poetry. She's played a lot more music than she's written poetry. Debbie?
Thank you, Marla. I chose to play something a little light and gay. It's called "Now Is the Month of Maying." It's a madrigal, and the words are, "Now is the month of Maying when merry lads are playing, fa la 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 la, etc. Each with his bonny lass upon the greeny grass. Fa la 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 la." Here's the song.
Thank you, Debbie. That was delightful. Now, have you considered what's in your heart? Do you have a worry, a concern, or a delight, or a joy you'd like to share? I'm going to look in the chat and see what I find and drop a pebble there. Thank you from Chip Charp to Cena Marina and Laurel Bussey for the rain, for sharing the rain and helping to display the Huff and Black Lives Matter banners at 4th and 5th Streets in these streets in Eureka yesterday from noon to 1:30. They are hardcore. They even do it in the rain. And Chip Sharp says, "May we find strength to act from the heartbreak we share with others near and far from Uvalde, Texas. May we find ways of responding to the justifiable fears of children and everyone." From Scarlett, "A joy for the amazing show I saw last night at Del Arte called Zambezi, a physical theater expression of the prison system performed by 2 young actors from Zimbabwe. It's showing again next week. I highly recommend going to see the show and supporting these 2 incredibly talented actors. Grateful for the opportunity to experience." And from Debbie, "Joyful for the rain gathering. And the ripples are spreading from your words to the congregation's hearts. One last stone for these joys and sorrows that remain unspoken." We'll have a moment of silence now to reflect on what we've heard and shared. I will ring the bell at the end.
Pat McCutcheon is our next poet. Pat's 5th grade teacher posted her first poem on the class bulletin board, and she never looked back. Her chapbook, Slipped Past Words, was published in 2015, and she's been facilitating Friday Poets since the pandemic began. Pat?
My poem is called Gutsy. February, and it's your birthday, Rosa. I honor you with renewed wonder. I knew about December 1955 when, a weary seamstress after a long day's work, you refused to give up your seat in the colored section for a white man and were arrested. Not physically tired, you said. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in. I've just learned that 12 years before, you clashed with that same bus driver, James Blake. You stepped onto his jammed bus on a chilly day in Montgomery, paid your fare at the front, then refused the rule for Black people to get off the bus and re-enter through the back door. I see you standing there, standing your ground until Blake, furious, yanked your gray coat sleeve, demanded you cooperate. I see you leave the bus that day rather than give in. May I have your gutsiness, Rosa, to not give in, however many years it takes. May I have the courage of those brave Black students who sat all day, ignored, spat upon, smacked at that Woolworth's lunch counter, and have the gutsiness of the elderly white lady who whispered to them, "Good boys." How did it feel, Rosa, in 1999 when you were awarded, as was Mother Teresa, the Congressional Gold Medal? When you died, you were the first woman to lie in honor at the US Capitol. But these decades later, what of Ahmaud Arbery, just jogging through the neighborhood, shot for being Black by 3 men who looked like my red-haired relatives, found guilty of murder? May their new jurors also be gutsy enough to acknowledge it a hate crime. An elderly white lady myself, I whisper to Ahmaud's spirit and to yours, Rosa, I'll find the guts to do more. Cena Marina is our next poet, besides holding the banner on Saturdays. She never thought of herself as a poet before joining the poetry group. Encouraged by all, friendships grew deeper, and she is having a good time.
Thank you, Pat, for waiting. My poem, I wrote this poem in honor of the courage and determination of the people of Ukraine. The news from Ukraine lays heavy on my shoulders every day. The title is, They Never Thought. They never thought they would fear sounds of planes overhead. They never thought they'd hear so many bombs falling. They never thought they would live in their cellars or root cellars. They never thought they'd leave family members behind. They never thought they'd have to melt snow for water to drink. They never thought they'd burn parts of their homes for heat. They never thought they'd search bombed out buildings for food. And they never thought they wouldn't have any food to eat. They never thought they would wear the same clothing for months. They never thought they'd run out of diapers and formula for their babies. They never thought they'd see dead bodies in the streets, or they would bury their children or friends themselves. They never thought they would depend on strangers for shelter and food. They never thought they'd be forced to leave their homelands. They never thought they'd die this way. And we never think it could happen to us. And now another poem from Pat.
Thank you, Cena. Mother's Day in Mariupol. Today, we begin our third month in this underground bunker at the steel works, drinking water from puddles. We're so thirsty. Cooking over open fires between missiles. I've never learned words to describe the terrifying sound of blasts. Dust fills the air. I'm lying on the ground, afraid to move. Flying glass cuts my mouth. Trapped alongside wounded soldiers and dead bodies, I have a hard time sleeping. One of them's my former neighbor. He moans his girlfriend's name. When I do sleep, I dream of them. Dimitri is 2 months old. We made it out of the maternity hospital despite the shelling. Will he know his warrior father, that man so kind and gentle, before he had to learn to shoot a howitzer? Will he remember nursing at my breast to a lullaby of bombs? Our next poet is Anne Kilby, who got to know about poetry as a little one when her dad included verse by A.A. Milne and Rabindranath Tagore in their bedtime read-alouds. She wrote one poem in high school, one in college, and one when she made baby crone. She began Senryu at Huff and gratefully joined Pat's Friday Poets for real growing.
Thank you, Pat. I have 2 poems to offer today. The first shorter and then the second a bit longer. And the first is an ode. Now, an ode is a poem in praise of something or other. Praise. Praise. You mean like stew? No, that's braise. This is praise, like popcorn, like peradventure, like pasture. Get back to the popcorn. Oh, popcorn. Pop, 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 poppity, pop, poppity, poppity, pop, 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 poppity, poppity, pop, pop. It's done, all puffy and warm. Look into the curves and dance in those creamy hues. Float in that fleeting aroma. Rejoice, praise, share. My second poem, it's apropos for the month of Mother's Day. It's called How to Help Your Mommy. And my mommy and also my godmother were born on May 24th. So, how to help your mommy. At the cabin on Sandy Beach, on our every summer 1 week's visit to where Mommy and Uncle Rainey and Uncle George and Aunt Ginny grew up all of every summer. The specific spot on Earth that is still the center of the universe for me. She, young mother, and I, little child, delight filling ourselves with all we have missed all year between. Every day there's a light show in the lively deep woods, covering the backshore slopes up and down the shorelines as far as we can see. The water of life laps in jolly wavelets from the east in the mornings. We run into the eelgrass green shallows laughing. And it presses in close in rambunctious stout waves by afternoon. At twilight, as we sit close up on the 14th stair step, the princess boat steams by, makes huge gleaming waves smooth pour onto the verge below us. Mommy knows about stars. At night, she tells me about them as we look way up, loving them. As a little one, loving, you want to help your mommy with all she does for us to live in all this grace. You do the best you know, considering that you are small and have to invent ideas of how anything comes about. I decided I could help with the keeping clean part. It seemed we were supposed to keep clean amid all the sweet, beloved sand and seaweed. And I did help my mommy, even way beyond intention. Through all the decades, when so often her life hurt and bewildered her, she would remember that time, and then all the renewing times at our source. Feel whole again, back in the glow of that morning when she was busy indoors and out on the porch by myself. I washed my socks in my orange juice and hung them out to dry. Jean's going to favor us next. Jean first came to love poetry when she was assigned to memorize and recite it in school. She hadn't written any of her own until she joined Pat's group. And she says, thank you, Pat.
Yes, I do, Pat. I also have an ode. It's called Ode to Old Legs. You've carried me over the mountains, up the steep, rugged cliffs strewn with boulders and slippery with moss, across the meadows, fragrant and fresh, into caves and crevices with their hidden treasures of unseen splendid art and otherworldly inhabitants. You've kicked me through turbulent waters and serene lagoons and into a world of weird and wonderful fins and gaping mouths and radiant color. You've carried me up the ramp and through the clouds to cities, towns, and distant worlds of sights, sounds, and customs strange. Over glaciers, frozen Arctic tundra, and scorching desert sands, across a world of beauty and wonder. You've served me well with a life of thrills and adventure, and I'm grateful. But today, I hope that you can at least carry me across the street and up the stairs. Pat?
Thank you so much, Jean. Now Annette is going to play the offertory. And as she does that, let us remember that especially in these challenging times, everyone's gifts are needed. This time offers you an opportunity to demonstrate the value that the fellowship offers and gives to you. There'll be a slide on the screen to help us figure out how to donate. Okay, and let us give generously. Thank you, Annette. And now we'll have another poem from Diane.
Thank you, Pat. Let me just say that this poem was written on Friday, just 2 days ago, after I heard a very brief news item about something that went on in a classroom in that Texas school when the shooter was inside the classroom. So I believe that this poem is based on, well, I'm fairly sure this poem is based on an actual event. The title is This World She Was Given. When the shooter looked away, the child reached for blood on the floor around her friend. She smeared her hair and face with blood, and then she saw the shooter move. She lay still, holding her breath and smeared with blood. She was 10. She lay barely breathing as he walked, his boots heavy on the floor. Her ears hurt with the shooting, and her body tightened, but she did not move and barely breathed. Her hands smeared with blood from her friend, dead beside her. The shooter walked toward her and stopped. She was 10, and even her heart was frozen. He moved on. She lay protected in the blood of her friend, smeared on herself like body armor. She was 10, and so smart that she bathed herself in blood to survive this world she was given. We will hear again now from Debby.
Thank you, Diane. My poem is called Lessons from the Garden. For Mom. I came home from your last goodbye. I will always love you. To the end of the harvest. I think about the lessons of the garden. I reap the last of the black beans, dry in their pods. They await shelling and storing. Their plants in the compost and straw on the soil, ready for winter. Beans shiny and beautiful in glass jars on the shelf. The act of reaping is not the end of the task. My mind turns to the lessons of your journey toward death, the tasks needed to finish our journey together. I wonder what will grow from the seeds you have sown, that I reaped and carefully saved in my heart. Our next poet is Colleen Broderick. Colleen, the poet, wrote her first poem in the 7th grade about spring. Her teacher accused her of plagiarism. Her second poem was written in 2009, by which time she had a lot more material.
Good morning. My poem is structured toward somehow living through these difficult times. Faith, the spiritual protection we seek in troubled times, can be elusive. Although unseen and unheard, it can be felt if we seek it. My poem is titled Prayer Flags. Driving to the home of my heart, my Buddhist community,
The primitive dirt road to Iron Knot Ranch cuts deeper and deeper into the box canyon. Me, seeking solace, embracing for disappointment. My stone cold heart contracts. My breath takes in the fetid air of my resistance, choking on dense black clouds of grief, clawing through the tangles of confusion. I am haunted. Visions of the naked, hungry, and thirsty. Thoughts of the hopelessly addicted, anguishing in hellish realms. Throngs of desperate refugees, pawns of war caught in the crossfire of a dictator's megalomania. The unrelenting ghosts of fear stalking the dull and hopelessly mentally ill, captive to terrors of the night. I am an involuntary witness of creation's torture and calamity. May everyone find a family of fellow travelers, protected, embraced in the arms of angelic guardians. The last bend of the road unfolds a dazzling bouquet. Chains and chains of prayer flags dot the mountainside. Tibetan prayer flags of saffron, carmine, emerald, and periwinkle, nimbly fluttering like quilt blocks, embellished with joyful blessings. Faint echoes of lamas and monks chanting deep-throated mantras that course through the candlelit sanctuaries, promising refuge within monastic walls. Prayers cruise lightly on lazy thermals like eagles, gently showering sentient beings with pink iridescent tendrils of comfort. Swathed in faith, resting in silence, we are protected and buffered from life's suffering. And now back to Anne.
Thank you, Colleen. Our service is drawing to a close now. We have our chalice. And it's time to extinguish the chalice, but we keep the flame in our hearts. And we continue the remembrance. For chalice extinguishing, we also have not a poem, but a speech. This is a golden oldie, William Shakespeare, from one of his plays, The Tempest. And Prospero says, "Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, we're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with sleep. Let us keep our connections, even though electronical. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, blessed be, amen, Ashe, Aho, Namaste. And go from here in peace as Annette plays for us.